Hey friends, welcome to another solo episode of the Allsorts Podcast with me, your nutrition ride or die, Desiree Nielsen. If you're new around here, I'm a registered dietitian with over a decade of experience in gut health, chronic inflammation, and plant-based nutrition. And I started this podcast to foster meaningful conversations about how we take care of ourselves. You can call it wellness, but it's wellness that's actually grounded in science, respectful of traditional medicine, and absolutely under no circumstances about restrictive mindsets. I like to say that we make wellness not suck. And every once in a while, I do a solo episode deep dive on a topic that is chosen by my community. And today, we're going to talk bloating. How in the heck will I talk about bloating for a whole episode? Isn't it pretty basic? In fact, bloating is one of those things that seems really cut and dried, but is actually super complex. We're going to talk about what bloating is, what causes it, and spoiler alert, it's a lot of things, how nutrition and lifestyle is involved, when to see a doctor, and most importantly, what you can actually do about it. If you love this episode and want to get even deeper into all things digestion, pick up a copy of my book, Good for Your Gut, at the library or your local bookshop because it's filled with useful information and a ton of great recipes that support gut health no matter where you are on your journey. But first, if you have IBS, you need to know about FODzyme. If you react to foods like wheat, beans, or garlic, you know how challenging it can be to eat when you are not at home. Garlic is in everything. But FODzyme's unique blend of 3 enzymes is a flavorless powder that you simply sprinkle onto your meal so you can enjoy these foods with fewer symptoms. And yes, it comes in a handy travel pack that you sprinkle over your meal before you eat. FODzyme is giving the Allsorts community 20% off their first order with the code Desiree RD. Visit FODzyme.com/DESIREERD to learn more about this incredible product that honestly is changing my life. Okay, you guys know the drill. We're going to start with the things I am currently obsessing over, then move to the main event, which is Bloating 101. And then we'll finish up with a community question before we say bye-bye. Let's dive in. Something that's on my mind constantly these days is just how much my mind doesn't feel like my mind, I talked about this a bit with Dr. Lisa Petty on season 3 of the pod, and very much I have been trying to tease out how much is hormonal changes, how much is anxiety, how much is life work overload, and how much is just screen life. And I just finished reading Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, and I absolutely think now that it's like 2023 that's fracturing my brain. For example, did you realize that in 1986, we absorbed the equivalent of about 40 newspapers worth of information a day? But in 2007, and this is before we all had iPhones, mind you, we were now absorbing about 174 newspapers worth of info each day. It's a lot, all of the time. Read this book. You won't regret it. Next up, can we talk about how olive oil is having like a major moment? For the last couple of years, you may have noticed that like all the food girlies on the internet were squeezing their olive oil out of a very aesthetic dark green bottle. Or not, maybe just me. But that is Grazza olive oil. And I have to admit that after all this time, I could not resist getting my hands on it. And it's actually quite delicious. Like, it's not just cute, it's very, very good olive oil. But more than that, folks seem to be putting olive oil in everything right now. I don't know who's responsible for that, but I actually think maybe it's Starbucks of all things. Starbucks released these like olive oil coffees. Haven't tried them, probably not going to. And they did it all to woo the Italian market. And I'm not sure how that went for them over there, but all of a sudden it's like the summer of olive oil. People like Justine Snacks are putting olive oil in their cocktails and mocktails, and oil and water. Doesn't it just float on top? I don't know. But also, when I was in Savannah a few weeks ago, I was served this strawberry coconut sorbet with flaky salt and olive oil. And you know me, I am all in for olive oil. So I'm very curious to see where this one goes. And finally, is it just me, Or do we miss magazines? I think I might have said this before. I'm almost sure I've said this before because I'm really feeling it. C point one in my brain, but like I'm really missing magazines right now because, in the dark ages before Instagram, I would just like flip through magazines instead of scrolling on my phone. And it was just so dang pleasant and non addictive. But unfortunately, like a lot of the big magazines right now have gotten decidedly less big and filled with content that you can just get for free online, which is super annoying. So I'm finding myself loving independent titles like Monocle Magazine, which is a bit of a vibe, but it has a ton of reading. So I feel like it's good value. They also came out with a quote unquote women's magazine called Confect. And then I found myself super surprised that Monocle is supposed to be a men's magazine. I don't know. Anyways, I love Monocle. I also love Cherry Bomb, which is all about women and food. Magazines for summer, read them on the beach, get into it. Okay, that concludes segment one of this roller coaster ride. So now let's talk about all things bloating. First things first, what is bloating? You might think you know, so listen up. Bloating is actually the sensation of fullness or pressure and maybe sluggishness that you feel in your abdomen. It may or may not be related to the amount of gas or poop in your gut. So, bloating is really a feeling with multiple potential causes, which is part of what makes dealing with bloating so complex because the experience is totally subjective. And bloating is different from distension, which is not subjective. Distension is the physical expansion of your belly in a measurable way. Like I can put a measuring tape around your waist and see the difference over time. So if your jeans are loose when you put them on in the morning and then you can no longer do them up after dinner, distension is likely at play. And why does this seemingly tiny difference matter? Well, as with most things in a complex area like digestive health, the more information we have, the more we can tease out causes for better solutions. If you feel bloated all the time, but have no distension and you poop regularly, like that tells me one thing. Like I'm probably not looking at excess gas production, and maybe this is like a gut brain phenomenon, like in irritable bowel syndrome. But if you have distension, well, then maybe we are seeing sluggish motility or constipation as the gut space gets expanded over the course of the day with gas and stool. But we could also be seeing abdominal wall dysregulation, which is a whole other thing. And so much of digestive health is putting the pieces of a puzzle together. And as a dietitian, I am constantly looking for clues about what might be behind your symptoms so I can better target those symptoms with nutrition. So now is a really good time to talk about what actually causes bloating. I'm going to cover 5 common causes of bloating. Trust me, there are a lot more, but you will get bored and you will stop listening. So I'm going to link to a blog post in the show notes on bloating so you can see some additional causes. And of course, I wrote a lot about bloating in Good for Your Gut too. The cause of your bloating is both one of the most challenging questions to figure out, but also really critical because the cause of your bloating is going to determine what the potential solution is. For example, for one person, as you'll see, you might want more fiber to get at your bloating. And for another, we might want to pull back on fiber, which is why at this point, I definitely need to mention that some one-on-one time with a dietitian is clearly optimal to help you get to the bottom of this. But if that's not available or affordable to you, I might recommend keeping a really simple journal for a week or two, like on notes on your phone, like nothing big, with your stress, your activity level, food choices, and symptoms to help you do a bit of the investigative work for yourself. Okay, let's start by talking about one of the most common causes of bloating, which may actually surprise you, but it's constipation. It makes sense when you think about the fact that if you have stool taking up a lot of space in your gut, it is both expanding the physical space of your abdomen as well as like blocking the normal passage of gas. And yes, you can poop every single day and still be constipated. For example, if most of your poops feel hard to pass or incomplete, you may actually be constipated. So what do we do about it? The bowel basics for constipation, totally, you're going to hear them and you'll be like, nah, like that's too simple. But in fact, They are super, super effective for most people, which are ensuring you drink plenty of water, moving your body daily, and getting enough fiber. How much fiber do we need? Fiber intake is generally in proportion to how much you eat. So, smaller, less active bodies are going to need like 25 grams of fiber daily, and larger, more active bodies need up to 38 grams a day. And here, consistency is key, as is making it easy to make these choices. For example, you are not going to drink enough water if you are drinking out of a tiny little glass. I highly recommend you get one of those big, dorky 28-ounce water jugs and keep it beside you on your desk. If it's movement, how can you schedule it in? Like, is there a meeting you can take via phone instead of Zoom to fit in a walk? Or can you do laps around the field when your kid is in soccer? You have to get real about what you can actually manage. And instead of creating this ideal world where you will rise at dawn to do your yoga while the rest of the house sleeps, when actually you're exhausted and you need another hour or two of sleep. I find that we do this in wellness all the time. We feel unwell or at dis-ease in our body. That feeling of unwellness makes us really anxious. And then we immediately hatch this grandiose plan that is completely out of line with how we live. And so, without a doubt, 3, 5, maybe 14 days, and it's over. We somehow intuitively reject these really small, but very doable and therefore very permanent actions that, when they build up over the time, transforms our health. Go small, be very specific in what you want to do, figure out how it works, and commit to it daily. Like, that is the secret sauce. None of these weird harebrained schemes on the internet or fad diets, none of them will stay with you for life, but these kind of things will. Okay, now, if you know that you are crushing it with water and fiber and getting some movement in every single day and still no go, this is when you want to talk to a doc about other potential underlying causes of constipation, because it could actually be constipation predominant irritable bowel syndrome, which is a whole other thing, and you need medical care for that. Like, you're not just going to do it with a little bit of psyllium. Next up, since I just mentioned fiber, this is the perfect time to mention that another common cause of bloating is actually too much fiber, too fast, or inconsistent fiber intake. This is really important for you to hear, because if you're like, oops, I don't get enough, there's got to be I got to get more fiber into my diet, like, immediately. But there is a right way to introduce fiber so you don't just make your bloating worse. And to demonstrate, let's talk about your morning smoothie. Like, I love a smoothie because it's fast and it makes it so easy to get a lot of good stuff into your breakfast and feel really, really energized. But it's also too easy to overdo it. For example, if you're adding a bunch of berries, ground flax and chia, a green powder, some nuts, and some oats, you could actually be getting like 15 to 20 grams of fiber in a single smoothie, which, if you are already crushing that fiber life, then it might not be a big deal. Just like, go for it. But if that is the only high fiber meal you eat all day, or if you drink this super concoction only sporadically, your gut will likely not be too happy with you when you do it. And I know it might be tempting to just front load your fiber intake to ensure you get enough throughout the day, but honestly, your gut just won't love you for it. And this is because your digestive tract thrives on routine. It wants you to eat mostly the same things on the same schedule, because your digestion will adapt to whatever your habits are. So if you are randomly throwing like 3 or 4 super high fiber meals in there amongst lower fiber fare, those high fiber meals will likely cause a lot of bloating for you. And it's not that those foods aren't good for you. It's that simply that your body isn't ready for them. And similarly, I find that when folks are starting to eat more plant-based meals or going completely vegan, they can experience a lot of gas and bloating as their body adjusts to their new lifestyle. Like, you can't just go from no fiber to high fiber quickly. Your body needs time to adjust. So if this is you, The key to your bloating might actually be to pare back on your fiber at certain meals and either redistribute it more equally throughout the day or just start to slowly build up your tolerance. How do you do that? If you are new to fiber, I highly recommend you start with one higher fiber food and eat it consistently, ideally every day. If you're battling constipation, I do love psyllium, which is a soluble fiber that holds water, so it makes stools easier to pass. I've got a blog post, which I'll link in the show notes, that tells you exactly how to use psyllium so it makes things better and not worse. It doesn't work perfectly for everyone, and if that's you, a couple other things you can try, like 10 prunes, so like 5 prunes twice a day. Yes, grandma's favorite, but they're really delicious. They're dried fruit. We need to like sort of get over this like weird prune thing in our head. Or if you're like, I just can't do it, 2 kiwis a day. Both of these fruits have evidence to suggest they help get you moving. And for those of you just looking to like eat more plants and fiber in general, make one change and keep it consistent. For example, maybe you swap your usual bread for 100% sprouted grain. You do that daily and you wait until you feel fully adjusted to the change. And then maybe you can start adding like a quarter cup or half a cup chickpeas to your lunch each day. Slow and steady builds a less fussy gut. Every single time. We're terrible with patience. Like that is not our best virtue in the 2023, but we need to get back to it because patience and consistency is what works. Next, we should talk about a couple of very overlooked causes for bloating. The first is what I call eating mechanics. Like this isn't like the nutrients we consume or the foods we consume. This is about like how we consume them, like eating too fast, not chewing your food, and eating while stressed. And you would be shocked at how few of us, maybe also you, definitely me, do not chew our food thoroughly on a regular basis. Unless you think this is some like airy-fairy, like wellnessy advice, let's talk about the actual physiology of digestion. Your teeth are the first and only physical digestion step in the process. Your teeth and tongue are intended to fully grind up food and turn it into a paste with tons of surface area to optimize the chemical digestion, namely acids and enzymes that come next. More surface area means more places for these acids and enzymes to attach to the food, which means better digestion and hopefully more complete absorption, particularly when you're eating more whole plant foods. Like most of us in North America eat a highly ultra processed diet. I mean, I love an Oreo as much as the next girl, but like we weren't meant to eat that like 3 meals and 3 snacks a day, right? And so when we're eating those foods, they almost break down instantly in our mouth and definitely in our stomach. Like these do not require a lot of physical digestion by design. So when you start eating more whole plants, plant foods have tough cell walls. That is what gives them structure. And physical digestion becomes really important for ensuring that digestion and absorption goes well. If you're like, I don't really get it, and you need a little bit of proof, the next time you eat corn on the cob, notice how much whole corn passes through your gut unscathed. Chewing. Get into it. Similarly, eating too quickly can cause issues because A, you are likely not chewing effectively, and B, when we eat quickly, we can swallow a lot of air that has to go somewhere. And it's like causing a bottleneck on a bridge. Your stomach is going to hold food until it senses it has done its job. And if you are eating a meal in like 5 minutes, not only are you eating too fast for your normal fullness mechanisms to kick in, because some of us read just like normally being full as bloated, like that's what we think that it is. But you're also placing a big load in the stomach really quickly. And you can feel this sensation of bloating as it holds that load for a while to complete the stomach's work of digestion. And stress is another huge one. Like if you've ever scarfed down a meal during a hectic workday only to have it sit like a lump for hours, like it just feels terrible. Eating mechanics definitely play a role here. Like You're not going to be eating too fast. You're going to be eating too fast, and you're not going to be chewing well enough in this situation. But also, the gut brain nature of digestion means that when you're quite stressed, you are in your fight or flight nervous system response, not your rest and digest or parasympathetic nervous system function. Those nicknames are not a cute accident. Like when fight or flight, when you're in that sympathetic response, the physiology of that response is to shuttle blood flow and energy away from the digestive tract, which is non-critical in the moment, to the brain and to the limbs. So you can figure out what to do fast and fight or run away. Digestion is not optimized in this state. And when you're super stressed, it's important because we all got to eat and stress is a fact, but it's really important to take a minute to come down before eating. And when you do eat, to be extra mindful to breathe, chew your food properly, and keep yourself away from distractions. Now, if you're hearing this and thinking like, there's no way I can manage that in the chaos that is my 9 to 5, here is a tip that I've used myself and also used with my clients. And that is before you eat, do 1 minute of square, also called box breathing. You inhale for a count of 4. You hold in that inhale for a count of 4. You exhale for a count of 4. And you hold the exhale for a count of 4. I don't care how busy you are. Everyone has 1 minute to do this. Close your laptop, breathe, and then take a few bites of food. If that's feeling good, keep going. If it feels like things are too stressed, go back to your work for a bit, let your tummy settle, and try it again. It's better to just like get little bits in small amounts so they're going to be less, particularly if you have something like IBS. Like if you're just like, it's fine. Like I have like a gut, like a tank. Okay, then every once in a while, this is going to be fine. But if you have something like IBS, it's much better for you to like take these mini eating breaks so that you don't aggravate. Because once you're in pain, that's going to make it a lot harder to do your work and to get through your day. So you have to sort of balance like whatever feels right for you in the moment. Okay. We have 2 more causes of bloating to go. And the first is definitely like, wow, okay, why didn't I think of that kind of cause? And that is abdominal compression. Ideally, your digestive tract will experience like a free and unblocked flow of food and gases. And if you were born with a uterus, the other thing that you need to know is that our digestive tracts follow a way more convoluted and squishy path than people who have testicles, okay? And the reason for that is because we typically have smaller torso sizes, but also our digestive tract was designed to like move in the potential of pregnancy. So we have what Dr. Robin Chutkan, and you totally should listen to her episodes if you're into gut stuff, but she calls it a voluptuous venous colon. So things are a little bit more twisty in there, but also the gut wants to be as untwisty and unencumbered as possible. But the reality is that most of us sit for like 12 hours a day in various degrees of abdominal compression that are made even worse if we're wearing tight clothes. Yes, wearing hard pants can physically hinder gut movement and will make bloating worse. You heard it here, folks. You have an invitation to start wearing much looser clothes or even flowing dresses if your bloating is really bad, with no waistband whatsoever, and see how that goes. And if sitting all day is non-negotiable for you, like it is for me, set a reminder in your phone to get up and move around every 60 minutes. You can go grab a glass of water. You can go to the bathroom. You can do like 30 seconds of a stretch or a twist just to help momentarily relieve the compression. And if you're really lucky, relieving compression is actually going to go a long way towards easing your bloating. Now, finally, last one, number 5, your bloating may actually be irritable bowel syndrome. Yep. Like sometimes bloating is just bloating. But chronic bloating alongside constipation or diarrhea and abdominal pain may actually be IBS. And so I won't go into IBS more because I need a whole other podcast for it. It's coming. Don't worry. But definitely grab a copy of Good for Your Gut and you will learn everything you need to know about IBS and go talk to your doc. And so this is where it's really important to mention that while everybody gets bloated from time to time, if bloating is chronic, like at least a few days a week for a few months, you need to get it checked. And if you have any alarming symptoms alongside your bloating, like abdominal pain, fatigue, vomiting, chronic diarrhea, or blood in your stool, you must go see a doctor right away. Like, don't mess around because you think it's quote unquote just bloating. Get it checked. Don't wait more than a week. Get it checked. And then once you've seen your doc and you know what you're dealing with, now you can start tailoring your nutrition. We're going to review a few longer term strategies and culprits for bloating, and then we'll talk about some rescue remedies that you may find helpful. The first longer term strategy is to work up, no surprise, to a higher fiber diet slowly. You want those 25 to 38 grams a day. You want to eat more whole foods like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, and legumes. Consistently eating high fiber foods will help ensure optimal digestion and elimination, and therefore minimal bloating. That sounds super simple. Like, you have heard this advice time and time again from me, and you're like, boring. But have you actually been there, done that? Because it takes a lot of effort, particularly in this food landscape and how busy we are. Getting that fiber in consistently is not as easy as we think. So how do you do it? Like I said before, starting with one high fiber addition or swap at a time, as much as you can, do it daily. Like the quarter cup of cooked or canned lentils to your lunch every single day. I love this because like they go with everything. Whatever you're having some sort of leftover, you're having leftover pasta, soup, stew, a sandwich, a wrap. Almost any food vehicle can take the addition of like a quarter cup of lentils. Super, super simple. Once that feels really good, you add another higher fiber in, like a cup of berries to your smoothie or oatmeal in the morning. Build it up slow and steady over time. Be patient. Health is a marathon, not a sprint. Okay. Another thing you want to evaluate, I'm going to make a lot of people upset here, including myself sometimes, is if you are swallowing a lot of gas. I'm looking at you, Topo Chico fans. By our, I told you, I mean my bubbly water obsession means we are all swallowing a lot of gas. And for some of us, this is no big deal. Like, oops, I belched a little, like whatever. Same goes for anyone who chews a lot of gum or sips their drinks through a straw. More swallowed gas, maybe no big deal, but it may also mean a lot more bloating for you if you are bloating prone. It is also possible, although less common than people think. According to the internet, like this is like 90% of us, and it's really probably more like 20% of us, that bloating could be straight up food intolerances. In fact, many intolerance type reactions are actually related to sluggish digestion, inconsistent fiber intake, and constipation. But true food intolerance does exist. For example, if you have IBS like me, you may be sensitive to the indigestible carbohydrates called FODMAPs. These are things like lactose in milk. Lactose intolerant is like rampant worldwide, as well as fructans in wheat and onions. And so for someone like me with IBS, FODMAPs can increase symptoms such as bloating, and trialing a low FODMAP diet with a dietitian can help you figure it out, because it's rare that like all the FODMAPs cause you a ton of pain and you're just going to have to avoid them forever. In fact, the ideal is not to avoid them forever. So you go on a low FODMAP diet, you remove them all for a short period of time, maybe 4, maybe 6 weeks, and then one by one you bring them back in so we can isolate which of those foods are causing you symptoms and then to which degree. So you may be like, I don't know, I can totally eat wheat and sometimes it makes me a little gassy, but it's like not causing me any pain. Whereas when you consume dairy products, you're like, whoa, all is not well in my shire. When you reintroduce them systematically, that's when you can sort of tease that out. And you may have noticed that when you keep a symptom journal, if that's what you're doing, that it really does look like you are getting quite bloated after a certain food. And If you don't have a history of disordered eating, like if you feel really strong in food relationship and can try doing this on your own, you can try cutting out a single food for a couple of weeks to see what happens. So you're like, okay, I feel like this is wheat. So I'm just going to switch to like oats and rice and all that kind of stuff for 2 weeks. What happens? What is important when you do that though? You have to be systematic. Because what I see is that folks will go on the internet and they'll be like, I'm so bloated. Like, all is awful. And then they go on the internet and people are like, it's gluten. And so you're like, I'm wiping out gluten. And your diet used to be like a cafe breakfast sandwich and then like a fast food sandwich and then like a big thing of like, I don't know, like, fettuccine Alfredo at night. And then you quote unquote go gluten free and feel so much better. But what's actually happened is that you're consuming a smoothie in the morning and this beautiful grain bowl with like lots of legumes at lunch. And then like, some protein and vegetables at dinner. You haven't just cut out the gluten. You've completely transformed like the nutrient density of your diet, the fiber content of your diet. And this is why being systematic is so important because people are like, well, go gluten free worked for me. But was it the gluten? For like if you get really bloated after you eat pizza every single time, it could have been the lactose in the cheese. It could have been the fact that it was like white flour versus whole grain. It could be that it's actually just a higher fat, lower fiber meal in general, because both of those things are going to slow down digestion. You have to get really curious and not just be like, it's the gluten, buy gluten. Okay. Before we close, I want to talk about a few rescue remedies for bloating. Many of these are actually herbs that either help facilitate the movement of the gut or help relax the gut muscles. And both of those things will help reduce your sensation of bloating. The first is probably kind of surprising, peppermint tea. I always have peppermint tea on hand, and peppermint is a carminative, which means that it helps to relax the smooth muscle lining the gut that can help ease that bloating feeling. Yes, your gut is surrounded by muscle. Like the way food gets from like our mouth on through the poop chute is because there is muscles systematically and rhythmically squeezing everything through, hopefully at the right pace at the right time, but not always. And that's how we end up bloated. The other herb that can really help is fennel, but fennel seed, not the fresh herb itself. So fennel tea can be really relieving. It's a traditional remedy for quote unquote wind, but also chewing a few fennel seeds after a meal. Like, don't use those like dank, musty ones that have been in your spice drawer forever. Like, go get yourself a fresh bag of fennel seeds. And if you've ever gone to like an Indian restaurant and they have these like tiny little candies that taste a bit licoricey after your meal, those are candy coated fennel seeds. So this is a remedy that's been used for a very long time. And what I love is it's really inexpensive and it's just food. So why not try it? It works. It doesn't work. Who knows? If you think the issue is your stomach emptying slowly, ginger might help, whether in tea or pickled or candied or fresh form. Ginger is what we call a prokinetic, which means it helps facilitate the movement of the gut. And specifically with respect to the stomach, it helps facilitate stomach emptying in a more timely fashion. So if it's kind of like this feeling of fullness in your stomach, maybe ginger will help. And also, ginger is so good for you. Get on it. Moving also really helps. And you're like, I don't have time to work out. Like, I get it. It doesn't have to be that complicated or that intense. Try going for like a 10 to 15 minute fart walk after you eat a meal, like after lunch or dinner. Yes, I said what I said. You don't want to work out after a meal. That's not going to help your digestion. What you want is gentle movement. Gravity is a thing with respect to digestion, and you're also decompressing the abdomen. So like a little 10-minute after dinner walk, get the toots out. It does help. Another thing you want to consider, I see this a lot in practice, is nighttime eating. If you typically eat a lot while watching TV after dinner and you wake up, because like if you feel great, then it's not a problem for you. But if you do this and you wake up bloated or like not at all hungry, you may actually benefit from giving your body a good 11 to 12 hours overnight to move food through. Just try this for a day or two. So, like, it's going to be dependent on when you wake up, when you typically eat breakfast. But let's say you stop eating after 8 p.m. and then you eat breakfast as normal at 7. This is not some sort of rigid intermittent fasting thing. Like, that's pretty normal, right? Like, stop eating after 8, give your body a couple hours before bed. If you have reflux, also super important. You want that stomach to empty before you then lay down so you're not getting overnight reflux. But yeah, stop eating after 8 p.m., eat breakfast as normal at 7. And if it helps, awesome. You don't have to be rigid about it. Like if you go out for a late dinner, don't worry that you've destroyed everything. No, you haven't. Do this as often as works for you. And if it doesn't, put it aside, consider another strategy. Okay, we did it. Bloating 101. Like, obviously, we could have gone even deeper. This could have been a 4-hour podcast, but you do not have time for that. This was just to give you a little amuse-bouche on like the basics of bloating. So before we say goodbye, let's go to a community question, and it is a gooder. Okay, the question is it true that seed cycling can help balance hormones? I absolutely think that hormone balancing is like the new gut health on the socials, and I hate to say it, but there's very little research to support any of the claims being made, including seed cycling. I will put this out there. In general, there is very little research done on women's reproductive health and perimenopause and menopause. Why? Because no one's figured out how to make money from it, honestly. But then also women's health, right? Like, we push through Viagra real hard on the pharmaceutical ends, but like women's health does not get the funding, the research intent, particularly quote unquote normal, like just understanding women's bodies and how these things work. It's just not happening. So that's part of why we don't have the research for it. If this is new to you, if you're like, what the heck is seed cycling? Seed cycling is the idea of eating pumpkin and flaxseed during the first half of your menstrual cycle to support estrogen levels, and then sesame and sunflower seeds during the second half of your menstrual cycle to support progesterone levels. Unfortunately, though, seeds, great, love seeds, but the theory doesn't really hold up. For example, ground flax is chosen for its phytoestrogen content, but sesame seeds also have phytoestrogens, admittedly like a little bit less, but they also have them. So like in both parts of the cycle, you're consuming phytoestrogens. And sesame is, anecdotally chosen for its vitamin E content, but the flax pumpkin seed combo that you're eating in the first part of your cycle actually has more vitamin E than the sesame seeds. So also it's like really shaky the deeper you look into it. Like part of me is like, it's not that deep, just like eat seeds. Wonderful. It's very nutritious, but it is pretty shaky the more you sort of look into like the philosophy behind it. But I have to say, allergies aside, there is no harm in eating seeds this way from a nutritional standpoint. I love seeds. I think we should all eat more of them. And eating seeds will improve your overall nutrition status, which is always a good thing for your body, including your menstrual cycle. But what is harmful, and I just, I can't let this one go, is the rhetoric of seed cycle, namely giving menstruating adults one more job to do simply because they have a uterus, or the idea that your body doesn't do a good enough job regulating hormones all on its own unless you eat this way, right? Like this body that has withstood like millennia of evolution, and we've survived 2023. There's almost 8 billion people on this planet. One would expect that reproductive health has been figured out, metabolically and genetically speaking. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived. But then now this like one, like cute influencer on the internet has the thing that's going to save you. And it's like a very specific and sort of confusing way of eating seeds. And that's utter garbage. Like, if you have something going on with your menstrual cycle, take it up with your doctor. I know that issues like PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and endometriosis are very real and quite common. We've done podcast episodes on them. I will link them in the show notes. I also know that it can be very difficult to get to the bottom of these and get the care that you need, because women are often not heard by their doctors when it comes to their health. I understand that. I understand that this is the reason why we seek alternative answers, why we go to the internet. When we aren't well, we feel ignored. We're not getting the care that our body needs. And so we're looking for anybody with answers. I understand that allure, but I want you to persevere. I want you to find a doctor who listens to you, a doctor who actually takes reproductive and menstrual health seriously. Because if it's PCOS or it's something else, seeds won't do anything to fix that. And if all you're doing is the seeds, and if you do the seeds for 3 months, 6 months, and your like issues don't go away, you are not going to blame the seed cycling. You are going to blame yourself. This is how we're hardwired. And that is heartbreaking for me as a health professional. Okay. Big asterisks, big like word of warning aside. If you want to try seed cycling, go for it. But no, there is no good scientific or even basic physiological evidence to seed cycle. So there you have it. Community questions. If you want to be involved in community questions, get into our Instagram or send me an email. So at the Allsorts Pod, and be like, DM me. This would be an awesome question for the next community question. Or send me an email at info@DesireeRD.com. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Allsorts Podcast, which is produced by myself and edited by Brian McCalman. We are grateful to live and work on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Until next week, friends, be well.